I'd like to now introduce our first session, where we're going to be thinking about the impacts of Brexit on the work that we do across the north of England. Brexit is something that we at IPPR North have written extensively about over the last year or so since the result was announced. On your tables, you've got a copy of our State of the North report from last year, which looked particularly at the impacts of Brexit in the north of England and highlighting the interconnectivity of our trade networks with the EU and how that leaves us particularly vulnerable at the current time. One of the things we want to try to do today is put some meat on the bones of understanding the impact of Brexit for the regions such as the north. And as I mentioned at the start, we're delighted to be working with City-REDI at the University of Birmingham. And this event today is supported through their ESRC funding for a big, major piece of work that they've been doing, looking at the impact of Brexit on the regions. And so to that end, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Anand Menon, Director of UK in the Changing Europe, and Professor Raquel Ortiga-Argelez, Project Leader at City-REDI at the University of Birmingham. If we can welcome them, please.
Thanks, Sarah, for that kind welcome. Thanks, Tom. And I should say, in the interest of full disclosure, thank you so much to Raquel for organising this event here in Leeds. I was born and grew up 10 miles down the road in Wakefield. I still come back to the city far too often to watch the football team lose. And it's always great to be back here. I want to do two things. I want to briefly tell you about the UK and a Changing Europe, what we do and why we're funding this event, and then say a couple of words specifically about Brexit and the North. The UK and a Changing Europe is a unique organisation. We're a network of academics, and we're funded to provide impartial information to anyone who wants it about what Brexit means for Britain. So our team includes Raquel and her team, but others working on everything from public opinion to Brexit and fisheries, Brexit and agriculture, you name it. We've got a team somewhere in the country who are working on it. And I suppose I would, but I do genuinely think that we are simply the best source of research-based impartial evidence on Brexit. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in Brexit, to go to our website and have a look at our work. We've got a big report out today on public opinion in Northern Ireland. We've got another report coming out tomorrow on the politics of Northern Ireland, all written by academics, all impartial in the sense that we're not trying to take sides in the Brexit debate. I would also, of course, encourage you to look at the fantastic work done by Raquel and her team on a crucial issue for our country, which is not just what Brexit means for the United Kingdom, but what Brexit means for the different parts of the country, because I think that differentiated regional effect is absolutely fundamental and, of course, is going to have massive political consequences going forward. And I'd just like to say to Raquel and her team, congratulations. They've been absolutely fantastic people to work with. They keep churning out this fantastic work, and it makes our life a whole lot easier. Just quickly then, a couple of things on Brexit and the North. The referendum was many things. It was obviously in part a vote about the European Union, but it was far, far more than that. It was also what Lisa Nandy's very fond of calling a howl of protest. Of all the statistics, and God knows there are a lot of statistics now about the referendum, the one that always sticks in my mind is the fact that 2.8 million people voted in the 2016 referendum who had not been able to find anything or anyone worth voting for in the 2015 election. The majority of those 2.8 million people actually voted leave. And for me, that suggests that the Brexit referendum was more than about our relationship with the European Union. It was partly about frustration. Frustration with a political system that didn't seem to be responsive to the needs of people. Frustration with an economy that wasn't working for the whole of the country. It probably would still come as a surprise to the editor of the Evening Standard, but not all of this country felt like we were all in this together over the last decade and a half. And one of the things that the Brexit referendum has done, I think, is it's changed the nature of our debate. Facetiously, one of the impacts of the Brexit referendum was that the South noticed the North. They looked up and they saw all these regions outside the southeast that have voted against what the vast majority of the political establishment had told them to do, and started to wonder why. I remember hearing these hilarious stories in June and July of 2016 about BBC and national newspaper journalists tripping over each other in Hartlepool, which they'd barely heard of before the vote, as they struggled to figure out what the hell had happened to our country. So Our national political debate has changed. We now talk about unfairness, whether it's regional inequalities, whether it's intergenerational fairness. What think tankers call the Overton window, the range of issues that it is legitimate to discuss in political life, is now, I would suggest, wider than it's ever been. And there is a real opportunity, I think, to talk in our political debate about things like the need for greater economic inequality across the regions of our country. Now, I'm not for the moment saying that this is going to work out. Our government is completely obsessed with Brexit and incapable of doing anything else. Brexit will, whatever form it takes, and whatever the Brexiters tell you, make our country less prosperous than it would have been if we'd stayed within the single market and the customs union, at least in the short to medium term. And there is a danger also that our politicians are spending so much time refighting the referendum between themselves that very few, if any, people are taking the time to sit down and think about the sort of Britain they'd like to emerge when we finally do leave the European Union. The lack of planning for that event strikes me as frankly scandalous. And the final thing I'd say is there is a rhetoric now on the Remain side of the debate that somehow the referendum meant we were cheated, we were robbed, we were lied to. Whether or not that's true, the pernicious effect of that is to cast doubt on the legitimacy of any arguments put forward by those who voted to leave. And I think, as I was saying earlier, there are many reasons why people voted to leave, and some of those were absolutely profoundly legitimate, not least those people who voted on the back of a growing dissatisfaction with the way this country had been run for so long. So I think, in summary, what I'd say is we're living through a unique moment in our politics. If I can put it metaphorically, the kaleidoscope of our national politics has been well and truly shaken. And the one thing I'd say, and the one thing I'd hope about events like the one we have today, is they're a fantastic way of beginning the process of thinking through how we'd like to put those kaleidoscopic pieces back together to create a better future. Thank you.
I'd like to now invite Raquel to say a few words.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes? Well, first, welcome to all of you to join us in this last workshop. This is our fourth regional stakeholder workshop that we are organizing linked with our ESRC project. So what I'm going to do now is giving a bit of background of this event and introducing just a few points, not very much, if you want, connected with research. They are connected with what is the project about and how much attraction this project has already have. The project is titled The Economic Impacts of Brexit on the UK, its regions, its cities, and its sectors. The research team is coordinated by myself from the University of Birmingham. I'm working together with Chloe Billing and Denise Sabink in Birmingham. One of the other universities working in the project is the University of Sheffield. Professor Philip McCann, who is going to present in the next section, is the work package leader for the regional analysis in our project. Then we have three more institutions from the Netherlands. We have the University of Groningen, where Wen Chen, Peter Hicksma, and Professor Bart Lost, they were working on the trade effects of Brexit. Then we have Nicola Cortinovis and Frank Van Oor, that they are working on the effects of Brexit on the competitiveness of cities and regions in the UK and also in Europe. And finally, Dr. Mark Thiessen, that is coming from PBL. This is an agency of the Dutch government who has put together the interregional and competitiveness trade data. As you see, we are a large team, and we are a large team composed by researchers from different institutions working in 2 different countries. This research has also been supported by a set of different partners. So as a partners, we have had IPPR North, and this is why today we are jointly organizing this event here in Leeds. But also we have had other institutions like Policy Scotland, the regional government of Scotland, well, probably the Scottish National Government, the Res Publica Centre for Cities, also the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, who since the beginning they were supporting our project. And as Professor Manon said, this project is funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, and this project is framed under the initiative, the UK in a Changing Europe, that is coordinated by Professor Manon and King's College London. We are very proud to be one of the projects awarded in the first round that is called the Brexit Priority Grants among these 25 projects that, as he mentioned, they are working in many different areas, from environmental policy to constitutional law, trade, migration, rural economy. So our project aims to examine in detail the likely impacts of Brexit on the UK sectors, regions and cities, and we do it using the most detailed regional, national and international trade and competition data sets. So our project already has captured a lot of interest. So this project started last year in April, and it will finish by the end of September this year. And we already have been invited to present our results in many different events. So, for instance, the annual Northern Ireland Economic Conference, the Regional Studies Association, but also the House of Parliaments, at the Treasury, at the Base Department, and the Foreign Commonwealth Office, also at some groups of all parliamentary members, for instance, the West Midlands one, because of our research also covers not only UK regions, but also all the European regions. Our project has captured some attention from the European Commission, so we have been invited already to present our results. We did present our results at the Committee of the Regions. Also, we are going in July to present our results at the European Parliament. But also because our analysis is covering a quite, let's say, broad range of sectors. We cover 56 sectors. Some sectoral associations that they felt that they didn't have any empirical, let's say, support to explain how Brexit was going to influence their own sectors, they decided also that it was important for them that we presented the results in some of the lobbying forums that they have. So we were invited to present our results in the Managing Partner Forum, and now we are part of the forum. And this is a forum of the Professional and Business Services Lobbying Group. And as you will see in the next session, Philip McCann will show that this sector is one of the sectors that are going to be more affected of Brexit. So around 500,000 jobs are going to be affected if hard Brexit is going to happen. And finally, Birmingham City is also putting together a post-Brexit commission, and I will be part of this commission because they need this kind of symbiotic relationship with academics that also they support somehow some initiatives that they are putting forward. So apart from this public engagement and also invitations to present, we have also been cited in, and contributed to some reports that are already public. And as I will say afterwards, this presentation is going to be shared with you, so there are all the links to all the reports that you might be interested also to have a look. So the reports are coming from, of course, the UK in a Changing Europe initiative, so there are reports on local and devolved government, reports that they came out of the 1 year after the EU referendum or 1 year after the Article 50. And then we also contributed to the report of the State of the North by IPPR North. We also have been mentioning the Centre for European Reform report, another report by Cambridge Econometrics on the effects of Brexit in the Greater London region. Also, Tony Blair's Institute was putting together a report on what we know now about Brexit, and they were citing our research. In the Wikipedia inclusion of Brexit, our research has also been cited. Another report from the European Parliament and from the Committee of the Regions is also making explicit citation of our work. So we are very pleased that even in such a short time that our project have been out has been really attracted so much attention by different types of institutions. Just a very short, let's say, a glimpse of what we are doing. So our analysis is focused on trade-related effects. For doing that, we use input-output analysis. And by using input-output analysis, we're able to look at the effects not only on exports and imports, but also intermediate and final goods. And you will see that this is the only way to capture the global fragmentation of the value chain. So we are able to somehow look at how Brexit is going to affect local GDP and regional labor income by treating this effect, looking at intermediate and final good data. Also, we are looking at the competitiveness, so how the effect might affect FDI, trade, and knowledge flows. The last work package is focusing mainly on the governance, so we are conducting these 4 regional stakeholder workshops and trying to interact with stakeholders from different parts of the country in order to capture somehow how these stakeholders see the effect of Brexit in their own region. And we are conducting some regional and sectoral case studies. So the extent, the regional extent or the geographical extent of our project is wider than other projects. We are looking at all the EU countries, we are looking at UK and EU regions, and we are also looking at different sectors and different jobs, and we are going to be looking at different occupations in the near future. So we are able to put together some new indicators, and we are able also to allow people to use new data. So finally, I just mentioned, of course, in my previous workshops, I was inviting everybody to come to the next workshops. In this last one, I'm just explaining to you our road show. So we started in Edinburgh the 4th of May, and that workshop, it was devoted to the devolved nations. So for you to have an idea, we were allowed to put together in a room the 3 chief economists from the 3 devolved nations. So we have representation from Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, and it was very rewarding because even some people never met before. So now there is a group of academics and stakeholders from the 3 devolved nations that they probably will interact in the future. And then the 11th of May, we had our regional stakeholder workshop in Birmingham, and that one was devoted to the effects in West Midlands. Maybe a bit biased because, of course, our institution, City-REDI, is at the University of Birmingham, so we wanted to have a regional stakeholder workshop in Birmingham. But we decided also to devote part of the workshop to the advanced manufacturing industries. So that was very interesting. We had people from consultancy companies like KPMG, the expert on automotive. We have academics that they are working on Industry 4.0 and how automation is having an effect on the manufacturing nowadays. So it was also a very interesting workshop. Finally, last week, we had our workshop in London, and that was devoted to the effects of Brexit on Greater London and also services industries. And again, we have a very large group of stakeholders coming from different industries, different services industries, and also people like Jonathan Portes talking on the effect of migration and how this might influence, in particular, service industries. And finally, today, our event, together with IPPR North, devoted to the effect of Brexit in the north of England. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy, and let's continue.
Thank you. So I'd just like to thank Amand and Raquel for giving us that really useful introduction to the Brexit impact research, and we look forward to hearing a little bit more about the detail of the findings just after lunch. It now gives me great pleasure to be able to tell you and welcome our keynote speaker for this morning, the first Metro Mayor of Liverpool. Oh, sorry, he's not here yet. Okay, sorry about that. So he's on his way, I think, is fair to say. So while we wait for him, why don't we take a couple of questions? Because I'm sure some of you have questions based on what you've heard so far. We have got some roving mics, I think. Anybody like to start us off? Yeah, just two people here.
Mike Obst, campaign for better transport. Transport is a function of economic activity. And the first question that I think is very relevant is there are various scenarios about the impact of Brexit. What is the anticipated, or do we know what the anticipated impact on Brexit is going to be on planned infrastructure investment, as particularly public transport? How do we ensure that if we end up with a declining revenue stream for the public transport operators, how do we ensure that the present matrix of public transport can continue to operate, particularly in rural areas where we could well see more significant economic decline, and where the whole issue of social inclusivity comes in? So the two questions are, one, what's the impact of investment? What is the impact on public transport? And also, what's the impact on freight? Because we've touched on freight. Are we going to see massive losses in the haulage industry? Is it going to affect rail, and in what way, etc., etc.? So these are all questions which I think need to be answered.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I mean, the sad truth is that the answer to virtually every question to do with Brexit, the honest answer is we don't know yet. And I think that's true in this area. There are some things we do know. We do know that if you assume we're going to leave the single market and the customs union, I think the Institute for Fiscal Studies has estimated that by 2030 public spending would be about 30 to 35 billion lower than it would have been had we remained in the European Union. So there is going to be a fiscal impact if we go ahead and do Brexit. The second another uncertainty, I suppose, is we don't know what government is going to be doing, because I've never in my lifetime experienced a period when we were less certain what both parties were planning to do. There's a lack of talk about policy, and partly for reasons I said before, because everyone is so obsessed in Westminster and Whitehall with Brexit that very, very little governing is getting done at the moment. And actually, in a way, that feeds into what Tom was saying earlier about the need for devolution. One of the most pressing, I mean, there's always been a good case in my book for devolution to the English regions, who never really got a fair look in. But one of the most compelling reasons in a post-Brexit scenario, as far as I'm concerned, is that Whitehall and Westminster are simply unable to cope anymore. That is to say, Brexit is such a massive challenge to central government that actually you have to devolve some powers now, otherwise things that need doing, transport being, there amongst them, are not going to get done. There is some evidence already. If you remember that row that occurred over Crossrail 2, when the government announced it wasn't going to do the electrification of the Cross-Pennine Railway, it was actually the Metro mayors that took a lead in the pushback against that. And I think that is very interesting and shows the need for regions like this to have proper political representation. The final point on freight, I am no expert on transport, so basically I'm just blagging at you at the moment, is we've got a team at the LSE who do the economic forecasting about the impact of Brexit. Their latest estimate is that if we leave the single market and the customs union, over the period of 10 years, our trade with the European Union could fall by of the order of 40%. So there's no way on God's green earth that doesn't impact on the freight industry. Mm-hmm. That's all. I mean, I don't know the specific. I mean, I know the headline numbers, but I mean, as I said, I'm no transport expert, but it seems to me, off the cuff, that sort of decline in trade is going to have all sorts of spillover effects in the transport sector.
Just the last thing I would say on that is that based on the research we've done at IPPR North, we already know that there is a very large disparity between the expenditure on transport in London and the South East and in the North, a figure of over £2,500 per head of population. So we would be very keen that there would be no disruption to any kind of widening, if you like, of that gap in a post-Brexit scenario. I think the other thing to say is that we know that a lot of our transport in the North has benefited from EU structural funds. and we are as yet uncertain as to what the government's shared prosperity fund is going to be post-Brexit. And so there's a real need for us in the North to try and influence that agenda to make sure that we're getting a fair slice of that cake when it finally materialises. Absolutely. 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 And yes, and European funding has been particularly important in that regard. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there because I think our guest speaker is here now.